What's up, guys, and welcome back to the podcast. My name is Robbie Cassidy, and this is part 2 of the original podcast on a time that changed my perspective or altered my perspective on life, on health, on relationships. And in part 1, if you haven't listened to it yet, I would definitely recommend going back and listening to that. I talk about preparing for the GAMSAT exam, which was an exam that I had to do before getting into my master's. And at the end of it, I talk about the suggestion a professor made to study or to read the selfish gene. So in this book, this podcast, I should say, I want to talk a small bit more about that book. And I want to talk about how you can apply it to life and how I applied it to my own coaching style, as well as how I applied it to the exam. And I actually decide midway through that I'm going to throw out a question from the actual exam. And then I try, not the one I did now, but a sample paper. And I try to answer that on the fly. So I did 2 of them. The first one, you can sit and watch me struggle as I try to think my way out. And the second one then is probably a bit more refined. But yeah, that's all for now. And we'll jump straight into it. Now, straight away, I said, okay, perfect. There's a way I can speed this up. I was driving up and down to Dublin. So I'm from Clare, for anyone who doesn't know. So it was 2.5 hours up, 2.5 hours back. And then I was staying with my sister up there. So it was like maybe 30 or 40 minute commute in and out to where I was. I looked up the selfish gene. It's 16 hours long, 16 and a half hours, I think. My goodness. It's not a storytelling book either. It's I guess when I was thinking about it first, I was thinking, is this going to be giving me a lot of answers to a lot of different questions on the exam? Was it going to be an answer for everything? Will it help with the written communication? If so, how could it? Because when I look up the selfish gene, and just so I have the exact description of it, the selfish gene is a book. It was written in 1976 on evolution by ethologist Richard Dawkins, in which the author builds upon the principle of George C. Williams' adaptation and natural selection. Dawkins uses the term selfish gene as a way of expressing the gene-centered view of evolution, as opposed to the views focused on the organism as a group, popularizing ideas developed during the 1960s by W.D. Hamilton and others. From the gene-centered view, it follows that the more two individuals are genetically related, the more sense at the level of the genes it makes for them to behave cooperatively with each other. Okay? Now, this is where I get to the point that I was going to say that this book is impossible to distill. I just read that straight off Wikipedia, and that was actually a really good description. The book is very hard to distill because they look at the survival of the fittest mentality. That is ingrained. That's a huge theme throughout the book. It also talks about altruism, so like helping those around you. The last line of that said, why 2 similar genes or 2 people who may be related are more likely to pull in the same direction, while those who aren't related, in a lot of cases, like when you look at tribes, are fighting against each other. So when I'm thinking about it there, actually, as I'm saying it, the book itself is really interesting because it talks about behavior. Now, when you look at it in relation to the exam, as I was thinking, is it going to be an answer for everything? And the more I think about it for the years after, it's not an answer to everything, because there are obviously a lot of criticisms for the book. It's a very famous book, and as you'll have with that, you'll always have your criticisms. But it is a way of thinking. It's kind of what I was thinking. That when I think back on what he was doing at the time when he gave us that book, when he said to read that book, it was a way of thinking. It was a different perspective on behavior, and human behavior, animal behavior, as well as plant behavior, to be honest, behavior of every living organism. And when you are going into an exam that is going to test your, let's say, your emotional intelligence, your ability to reason, your cognitive process or your processing power, as well as your memory and many other forms of intelligence that are not coming to me so readily at the moment. But yeah, when you're going into an exam that's going to be testing that and all of those different things, and you have to formulate opinions now outside of the biology and that. Now, in fairness, actually, I have to say, from reading the book, it did help me with my biology. Not organic chemistry as much, but it did help me to reason. And the book itself is, as I said, it's a different perspective on things. It helps you to formulate opinions when you're assessing a situation, and you can look at it in the opinion of what the selfish gene would say, like how the selfish gene may view the situation. I think view might be the wrong word, but how you assess the situation, I suppose, through the lens of the selfish gene, or Richard Dawkins' perspective, or survival of the fittest perspective. Who's the beneficiary when you look at any situation at all? Why would they consider something that way? And the thing is, you can actually apply this to everything. You could apply this to politics. You could apply this to sports. You could apply this to rehab or health. Health really is a big one that I applied it to after. You can apply it to your daily living or your family members or your relationships of why they act certain ways. And it's funny because once you read it, you start to pick up on small cues that people lay that out as well. To be honest, it's not just about people. You can look at animals, you can look at plants. It just gives you a different opinion. What's driving certain behaviors or what's driving certain opinions when you do. Now, as I said, like to try to distill the book into a certain like snippet, I don't know how. I'm sure the guy who did that on Wikipedia had to do that a couple of times because that was actually very well done. But it is based on that survival of the fittest mentality and altruism. They're kind of the two that it looks at. Why animals do what they do, why everything acts in certain situations, and just behavior overall. Now, how does it look at that, or how does it dive into that a small bit more? Well, the idea, or one of the main themes or ideas going through the book, is that the gene is selfish itself because it's looking to replicate. Okay, so let's just say I think 70% of people in Ireland have blue eyes, or 60%. There's a high percentage of people in Ireland have blue eyes. That's obviously a gene that continues to replicate. If it wasn't a positive, then it would die off in some way. It doesn't always have to be a positive gene, and it's great for everybody. But if it wasn't a positive thing in its environment, which is in Ireland, let's say, it would die off. That way, the gene would die off. So it looks at, when you kind of get your mind around it, and I'm trying to put it in the easiest way for some people who are listening to this. If you look at animals with 4 legs versus animals with 3 legs, okay, the very simple example, the ones with 4 legs are going to have a better chance, say horses specifically, with 4 legs are going to have a better chance of replicating because they have a higher chance of survival, and then in turn having a better chance of replicating after that. So the gene that gives them 4 legs, very simple example obviously, simplistic way of looking at it, will continue to replicate, and the gene that gives them 3 legs will slowly but surely disappear, because 4 legs in this situation is better than 3 legs for movement, for escapability, for everything. Okay, so when you are looking at it that way, that's a very basic way of looking at it, but that's what the selfish gene is about. It's why genes are replicating as well as why other ones die out, and it comes back to the survival of the fittest mentality. Simple as, like, that's what it is in a simple way of looking at it. Now, how does that relate to altruism? Well, think about it. If you're like, why does a mother love their children? Well, apart from the fact that it carried them for 9 months and then feed them for 18 years or 25 years, probably more now at this stage for a lot of people, or even more, is because they want to give their genes the best chance of survival and the best chance to replicate. Now, when you start to look at it this way, it does get weird, because you're thinking, well, is this just for replication? Is there no such thing as love? Is there no such thing as companionship? there is, and it's funny because he's able to distill it all down, and he's able to break each of them down about what love is and companionship, and why people don't just get with one person then jump onto the next person and jump onto the next person, and just have kids with everyone, even though, and he makes the argument, or mentions it, that from a male perspective that could be an optimal strategy to spread it out as much, but the only thing is you don't know if your genes will survive. From a female's perspective, because you have to carry the child and feed it for 9 months and then 18 years after, it's better to have one mate. So he does, it's very interesting that he kind of breaks it down. He looks at why there is like courtship involved in relationships, the way, let's say, looking at it now, the way people get married and then they have kids. Now obviously not everyone, and nothing applies to everyone, that's the thing, but in general, why these things happen, because the more the man is invested, the more likely he will be to produce more offspring with the same thing. And the same thing goes for animals in certain situations. Obviously you have like a stallion who just does his business, or a bull, let's say, who does their business with everyone, but at the same time, if another bull comes in, they'll fight to the death. So because they want, that one bull wants his genes to replicate it while the other one doesn't. And you'll see it in the animal kingdom a lot, where a male will come in and kill the offspring of a female, because if they kill the offspring of a female in a lot of situations, that female will go into heat. Now I'm using farmer terms, but go into heat faster so that they will be able to procreate again. So the book goes into a lot of detail on that. Now, when you get asked those questions of why someone has a certain opinion, and you're able to bring it back, see, this is the thing. This was what I thought when I finished the exam. I was like, geez, he was spot on with that. Is that if you can, all they look for is an opinion. Formulate an opinion on this. But you always have something to back it up to. So you always have something to fall back on. You're not left looking. So if it was to go back to it, and I'm just going to do this on the fly now, so hopefully I can get this right, because I haven't done this in a while. But let's say the young suffers less from their own errors than from the cautiousness of the old. So as I'm looking at that in a certain situation, the young suffer less from their own errors than the cautiousness of the old. So older people cautioning them, telling them to like avoid fire, telling them to avoid certain, like avoiding the road or avoid certain animals, they become overcautious, and then as a result they become overcautious, and then they become a lot more vulnerable because they rely on other people's opinions as opposed to their own opinion. And then because they don't rely on their own opinion, become less likely to go out of their way and to put themselves at risk. But if they did put themselves at risk, they would learn faster. And then what does that mean for that person is that, to bring it back to the selfish gene, if they don't put themselves at risk, they're obviously less likely to put themselves at risk for a mate. And as a result, they're going to have less options for mates, because of the fact that they will look for, in a social hierarchy, a mate looks for the highest level they can achieve as opposed to the lowest. And when they look at risk takers, and when they look at people who are putting themselves out there, or not putting themselves out there, people who are willing to challenge themselves and willing to climb the ladder, for lack of a better term, that means that their chances of survival and their chances of living a happy life, because the whole thing was about happiness, then are less, because of the fact that they aren't putting themselves in situations that, I don't know, that they're risking. My God, that took a lot out of me to say that, or to formulate that. I would have to do a lot more of these to do it, and I should have. But it's better to waste one's youth than to do nothing with it at all. Wasting one's youth means that you are going out of your way and you're trying new things and you're trying to learn new skills, and then basically you're just getting out in the open, getting out in nature, and you're trying to, as I said, learn new skills. You're trying to become a better person all the time, as opposed to wasting it or doing nothing at all, where you're just staying in around your family, because of the fact that you're getting out into nature more, and you're starting to experience new things. You're going to meet new people, which gives you a better chance of survival in the long term, because you have all these other skills, while the person who stays at home only has the skills of the person of maybe just cooking and cleaning and staying at home. And then as a result, you have all these other skills. You are ranked higher in the social hierarchy, and then you get a better chance of a mate, so you get a better chance of survival. So if you have a better chance of survival, in general, you'll have a happier life because you won't be as worried, and you know that your offspring will have a good life after you. Okay, that was me just, sorry now if you're listening to this thinking, what's he talking about? But that's just me spitballing there really quickly about how you can connect everything to the selfish gene. Now, when I was doing this, I was a lot more locked into it, and I was able to formulate opinions like in a lot more detail, and I'll obviously brainstorm it out and do it all that. But you can bring it back to the level of survival, because as they say, looking at the written communication, your writing will be judged on the quality of what you have to say in response to the theme. The theme is happiness. You have to look at happiness in what actually is happiness. Is it survival? Is happiness living a comfortable life? Is it living a life where you take risks? And as long as you're able to connect that in, then you're good. So how well can you organize and present your point of view, and how effectively can you express yourself? If the only thing you know is Christianity and all you talk about is Christianity, then they have to judge you on how well you talk about Christianity. That's the thing. How well you present your point of view. So the selfish gene, in a way, in this exam, kind of comes to a small bit of a religion, for lack of a better word, I guess. But it does a small bit, yeah, because you do reflect back on it all the time. Now, when you, like, the book itself is very interesting. I would recommend you read it. I recommend or listen to it. I actually listened to it. I haven't read it because I was driving so much. It made more sense for me to listen to it. It gives you a good idea of why people act in certain ways. And as I said, it gives you good insight into behavior, and it's so applicable in so many situations. It's surprising how applicable it is in so many situations. Now, how has it actually affected my perspective since? Well, I changed my view on behavior and rehab. Easily. Changed my view on adaptation, how the body adapts, why people form certain opinions about certain things, who people trust, why they trust certain people, why the body, or how, the body is so adaptable, as well as when you start to learn new things on it, like you can bring that back and apply it to it again. So why is the body not mechanical? Well, we know that the body's not mechanical. It may adapt to certain, let's say, pressures it's put under. If you lose a leg, if you've a leg amputated at a young age, and they give you a prosthetic, well, your body will adapt to that. Your spine will adapt to that. And everything, your hips and everything will adapt to it over time. So does that mean that you get more pain with that leg? No, it doesn't mean that, because we're looking at it in two different perspectives, and you have to assess it from all perspectives. The body is excellent at adaptation, and it's excellent at survival, and it survives because it can adapt. Now the pain system is completely different. The pain system is more of a emotional response, not always emotional. It's obviously you can feel it, so it's physically, you can feel it all the time, but it's not directly related to the mechanical side of things, because the body has already adapted for the mechanical issue. It's already offset the hip. It's already now built up a bone spur on one side of the hip, okay, because there's two areas that were rubbing and it needs to be stronger, so it starts to build up a harder part to that bone. You could also look at it that it builds up more cartilage on the opposite side, and the knee below it, and the muscles change as well as how the part that on your brain that leg was represented on changes also. Okay, so you have to why does it do that? Like, why has it changed? Well, the reason that it's changed is because the gene needs to have its best chance of survival and replication. I know it's funny bringing us back to it, but it does. Like, that's what it does. It wants to replicate. And the thing is, when you look at it, when you read this book, you have to take into account, like, this is just a perspective, and it's a different way of thinking. It's not a way of life. Like, it's not that, okay, my brother is a big ball of genes over here, so He's like, I'm not going to think about anything emotionally. I'm not going to think about anything. That I'm just going to just make sure that he replicates, has kids, and his kids have kids. So I'm going to give them the best chance. Okay, like you obviously still have to live a life, and you still have to have a normal perspective. But it does change your view on a lot of things of why a mother is so protective against her kids. And look at it in an animal situation, like more people die from cows than they do bulls every year. And that's because people getting into a ring getting into a crush, let's say, or a field with a cow that's just given birth. That cow now is extremely protective, and they go after the person, even if it is a farmer that's always been there. But it's protecting the child because it wants that child or that offspring to grow up and replicate again, as well as the fact that it probably held it for 6 months or whatever the incubation period is for that. For a cow, I couldn't tell you what it is for a cow. But it does, as I said, it comes back to the body is about survival. It'll do what it has to do to survive. It won't just give up. Okay, and this is the thing. This is why when people say to me that, oh, my back is done, my knee is blown out, like the way you often hear it in the media and like in sports in the media, is crazy. He blew out his knee, like his knee is done, like never be able to do anything again. That's not the case, because if that's the case, then the gene doesn't have the best chance to survive. So the body will adapt, and it will figure out a new way, however, and it will make it as optimal as possible for the gene to survive, to replicate. Okay? And now this, I was just talking to a friend last week, and this popped up, and I was talking about it, and I was like, oh, it started to re-jog my memory of a lot of my ideas on survival, where they came from. And I was like, it was that book that kicked it up for me. So I started researching it again. But everything serves a purpose. When you look at somebody, everything that they do serves a purpose. The opinions they have and the attitudes they have serve a purpose. The belief systems they have, they serve a purpose. And the purpose is for survival. Like, that's what it is. So when you have different people who are over aggressive, or people who are very quiet and shy, they both have certain aspects or certain elements or certain parts of their body that over time, that gene has continued to develop, and it's been lucky enough to replicate. But not lucky, because the weaker versions of that gene died off over millions of years, thousands of years. Okay, the weaker versions died off. The stronger versions stayed true. That's the thing. It's very interesting that way, and so it looks at survival of the fittest. It looks at development and how we develop. And when you look at it that way, animal and human behavior at a base level are very similar. And there's a book, it's like the monkey brain, or you can think like your crocodile brain. They talk about a lot of these behaviors and these survival tactics, about how they're ingrained in us. And I think an interesting one, when you look at it, like if you start fasting, fasting is a big thing now. They're like, oh, I started fasting, I'm so much more alert, I've so much more energy, I feel that I can learn things faster, I feel that just everything improves, my performance improves. Why would that happen? If you stop eating, why does that happen? Well, if you think about it, years ago when you were hunting and you didn't have food, all your senses would have to be heightened so that you can get food. And then when you get food, the blood goes from your senses back towards the energy spent in your body goes from your senses back towards digestion, and they all calm down again. Okay, that's an adaptation for genes. That's a gene. The people who didn't heighten their senses when they got hungry, they died off because they get hungry. So that's the other thing. Then you look at he goes into a lot of he goes into altruism, how certain fish help certain sharks, how like certain physical appearances on people are more desirable, whether it's if people have large glutes, it's because they sprint faster in general. That's the idea. I won't go into a lot of them, but yeah, if like large glutes is one. Another one that I heard, I don't know how true it was like if someone had large breasts, it was because they could feed more offspring. If a person had bigger eyes, obviously their vision was a big thing that they looked at. If someone was very strong and muscular versus someone who was obese, well, the very strong and muscular person would be more likely to be able to hunt and be able to catch food and be able to provide for the family. So there's loads of things. And as I said, why are families so connected? Well, you want your offspring to have the best chance. You want that gene to have the best chance to replicate. So that's why now this comes back to like, obviously people aren't friends with all their family and they might not talk to their parents or they might not talk to their uncles or aunts. But in a general sense, you, in a very inherent way, you're supposed to want your family to reproduce, whether that be your uncle, even though those genes aren't the exact same, but you still want them to reproduce because that's part of your tribe. So I've been going on now about it a while, but it's a really interesting book because of the fact that it goes into so much detail on all these little things about how like, as I was saying, there's certain fish that go in and clean the mouth of a shark. Why doesn't the shark just eat them? Well, obviously there's a beneficial aspect to that they've clean their teeth, pearly whites. But that's one of them. There's loads of them. The book is basically a full book of examples about how certain genes have developed and why they have developed. Like, off the top of my head, a cheetah. Okay, if a cheetah was bright red, the cheetahs that came out bright red are less likely to survive. The ones that had a pattern that the animals couldn't see them were more likely to survive. So the gene for bright red fur died off, even though it was, and then it goes into a lot of detail on like, but for a while that would be a very attractive thing to someone else because it stands out more, and anything that stands out more it's more attractive because it's more unique. So for a certain time the red fur would have stayed around, but then when they found out, when it came back down to the hunting side of things, the red fur dies off. Okay, so that's why little changes, and it really looks at like when your emotional intelligence develops, in like with humans, let's say, that it's the smaller things that make a big difference. So that's why the unique changes make a big difference, because they're a lot more attractive. Like one of the examples was people with green eyes is a lot more unique. So people are attracted to people with green eyes more. So there's loads of them. Very, very interesting. Would definitely say to check it out. Put it on 2x speed though, and if you're listening to it on Audible, or you'd want a long drive, it did take me a long time to get through it. But I had the time to wait, or to use, because I was driving. I was going to say to waste, but I had the time to use because I was driving up and down. Very, very interesting. It'll give you a different perspective on a lot of things. It's something that you can't like take and run with it, but don't apply to everything. It will give you a better idea of why people act certain ways, like why certain behaviors have developed. That's a huge one, and it's, as I said, it's difficult to distill. The other thing is that your genes can express differently depending on different experiences, but I'm not going to talk about that now because I'd actually love to get somebody who is versed in genetics to talk about that a small bit more, about how different experiences will change their genes, how they may become more fearful, may become more aggressive, in different situations, like why a street dog would become more aggressive, even if they were if they came from a nice, let's say, a family home where they were their mother was in a lovely situation, but then the dog got put out in the street. Well, they would have to become more aggressive to survive, so the gene expression would change to become more aggressive. But hopefully now I gave you a better idea of what it's about. As I said, it started because I had to do the GAMSAT, and that was, he basically said, for written communication, and for the reasoning side of things, just read this book because it'll give you something to always fall back on. But yeah, that's everything I'm going to talk about today. Hopefully that was interesting. Hopefully you took something from it, and for those of you who do go and get the book, definitely let me know how you got on with it, what you took from it. And I'd love to get any extra comments that you have, anything that you're interested in, or anything that you'd like to chat more about. Fire them my way. There's obviously a lot of criticisms of the book, but it is definitely a perspective changer, and I would recommend people to read it because it gives you. It's not a very spiritual book. He's actually a massive atheist, but if you're looking at like the idea of love and stuff like that, he does in a small way cut it down, because it's like it's not love, it's about replication and all that. So it can seem inhumane at a certain times, but it is still very, very good, and it will definitely you'll feel, I was going to say more enlightened, but I don't know if that's the right one to use, but give you a different perspective is probably the best way to look at it, on behavior and everything about it. But yeah, that is everything from me today. The book is Selfish Gene by Richard Dawkins. I'm Robbie Cassidy, just in case anyone's wondering if you've just stumbled upon this podcast. Mobility Tutor on Instagram and TikTok. Definitely check out TikTok. I'm building that a lot more, and it's not the same content as I have on Instagram because people ask me questions and I just answer the questions. It's a lot easier. And do send on any questions you have. I would love if you could rate this podcast on Spotify. And if you have any suggestions of things you'd like me to make different, or people you'd like to bring on, I would love to hear that also. And yeah, subscribe on YouTube. I'm going to put a link underneath this to if you want to download. It's basically a free return to running protocol, and it's for people who have lower limb injuries or who have lower limb issues and they want to kind of get back to running. It's a very easy way of building you from a low pace up to sprinting again. So check that out. I'll pop the link in underneath this. You can just download it and save it on your phone. It's very easy. Yeah, that's everything for me today, guys. Hope you are all doing well out there. Hope everyone is happy and settling into the nice winter that we're about to have. But yeah, that's all. Thank you so much again for listening, and have a good one.